All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're live here on YouTube answering your genealogy questions. My name is Fred Wirtz. I'm the Digital Services Manager here at the NYGMB. I'm joined by Joshua Taylor and Susan Miller. Josh is the president of the NYGMB, and Susan is our Director of Programming and Education. So thank you for joining us. We've received a lot of questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. And so let's get right into it. Thanks again, Josh and Sue, for joining us. So our first question, Marcia asks about landowner maps. Are there any landowner maps prior to 1850 for the Western New York counties, towns, or townships?
Okay.
All right.
First of all, Western New York is a very large area.
Prior to 1850 for the Western New York counties, towns. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Western New York is a large area, so whenever possible, you probably want to narrow down your search or your question, hopefully even to the county level. Josh, jump in anytime you have anything.
Yeah.
That part of the state wasn't settled, though, early in 1800s, more in the mid to late 1800s. Some of the best maps I've seen with property owners' names or the people who lived on the land. De Beers had an atlas from 1868, 1869. Many of those maps are digitized on newyorkhistory.org. I think that's the right, let me just double check the URL. I think I wrote it down. It's newyorkheritage.org. It's New York Digital Collections. And you can search by county and town. Other ideas, Josh?
The other thing I can think of, depending upon where in Western New York, if they're part at all of the Home and Land Company, the survey books from that area, some of which are at the New York State Archives, would be helpful.
Yep.
And within the Home and Land Company records, there's actual maps sometimes that the agent will draw out of all those who had agreed to purchase property. But it's a long shot. It's something you want to check out. But yeah, I'd look for any surveys and things that are done. But I don't know of a sort of collection that includes multiple counties and multiple towns that was formalized at that point.
Right. So yes, looking for
surveys.
Yeah, and local historical societies and libraries, that's also a very good resource. You could check with a local public library or historical society and ask them what's in their collection, because a lot of those things might not be digitized at this point.
Yeah, and even, towns have historians in New York, and contacting the town historian and asking them if they know of a map. Maybe the historian created a map themselves.
Yep.
That's a possibility too.
And so yes, and if you don't have a map, finding the land records and learning to create your own map.
Yeah. Yep.
That's fun.
Okay, great, thanks. So this next one will definitely apply to us all. Elizabeth asks, what tips would you have for researching immigration records for an ancestor with a very common name? And I suppose maybe more generally, what do we do with those ancestors with super common names?
You want to start that one?
I will start that one. Depending upon the time period, if someone coming into New York in sort of the Castle Garden areas and before, those records were destroyed, and so we use the customs passenger lists as a substitute. But they're not as detailed as some of the original passenger lists would have been, and so sometimes someone will be Mr. Smith, and you have to look for other characteristics about someone that defines them beyond their surname.
Right, and you may not get to the point where you have just one candidate. You could have a series of people coming in different years and may need to look for, as you mentioned, those other records that would say, it can't be this person because they had moved to Ohio, before that date, so they had to have arrived earlier or something. So you'll have to match those passenger lists with other records to find the right person. And you may never narrow it down.
Yeah, researching common surnames for me is all about you develop what you know about a family or an individual beyond their surname. It requires you to do research without thinking of someone as a Smith or a Green or a Taylor even. Because I have the problem with the Taylors. It was with the Millers all the time. And you have to figure out, okay, what about them can I search for? What are the patterns that I can recognize as I'm going through those records?
Yeah, and specific, Josh, you brought up the immigration in the early time period from 1820 to 1897, when all the immigration records burned, it is the customs list.
Mm-hmm.
And because those records were created by the U.S. Customs Service, they didn't care about a lot of details. So the lists are limited in the amount of information that you'll have on those passenger lists.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great, thanks. So our next question is from Caitlin. She asks, what are the best sources to find legal documents such as wills or land deeds for Hamburg, Erie, New York for the late 1700s and 1800s?
Land records, we love land records in New York. Right? Land records for most counties in the state of New York, including Erie County, have been microfilmed by Family Search and are digitized. So they are online at Family Search. However, they are not indexed. So you can't find them by going to Family Search and typing a name into the name boxes and looking for land records that way. You need to go to the collection and then search within the images. We do have a webinar that Robert Raymond from Family Search did for us, and it is in our recorded videos and webinars under tools. Fred, is that the right place on our website?
Yes, tools and resources, webinars. Yeah,
Webinars.
That's right. Yep.
So you can watch that recorded program from Robert Raymond on how to find those records specifically.
And I would just add, not every land transaction is recorded, especially in early days. If you know someone on property because of an assessment list somewhere or a census record, sometimes you have to trace the property backwards to the land records to figure out exactly where it sort of disappears or comes into play rather in the records there.
Right.
But yeah, those are online at Family Search.
A lot were recorded, but many were not.
Yep.
So yes, effectively searching backwards from more current owners going backwards.
Yeah, I spend a lot of my evenings after 5 p.m. on Family Search and the New York land records, sort of looking through those different collections.
But they are very important for New York research, so they are worth the time spent.
And be sure to check the mortgages as well.
Yes.
It's not just the deeds; it's also the mortgages and probate records. It's that full set.
Right, because early land could have been transferred through a will or something, and not recorded.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. And for those of you interested in that, we will be posting a blog that rounds up all these tips, and we'll have links to all of these online resources in there. So feel free to check back tomorrow or the next day, and you can find an easy link to that collection. So our next question comes from Susan, and she wants to know if there are any updates on the location of the New York State Family History Conference, and this would be the one occurring in 2018.
Yes.
Yes, Sue. that's one of Sue's major roles.
Good question. The New York State Family History Conference will be held September 13th through 15th, 2018. It's in Tarrytown, New York, and it will be held at the DoubleTree Hotel there. So we will have a block of rooms that people interested in coming to the conference can register at the hotel with the conference rate. That's not open yet. That won't open till at least September 2017, a year in advance. Registration for the conference will open either late 2017 or early 2018. Plans are, as we have done before, to have national quality speakers, even though this is a regional conference. We are working on lining up some sponsors, and we'll have more details soon. We'll have, let's see, obviously we'll have New York topics. We'll have genetic genealogy, we'll have methodology and New York topics. And we may have to have a separate talk like this on the conference at some point.
Yeah, I think so. Just, for those of you who never attended NISFIC before I joined the New York GNB, I came as a speaker, and I'm always amazed at the quality of a regional conference like that. And NISFIC is the chance to learn anything you want to know about New York genealogy. There's the exhibit hall with all sorts of people that know New York inside and out, with the products there and the books and everything else that you need. And add in a little bit of genetic genealogy, and it'll be a very, very fun event.
Right. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And actually, just on this note, what else is going on with the NYGMB that you might want to share with everybody? Any other upcoming things like that, or
yeah. Well, I was going to say that there is a lot happening. We sort of launched the new website like a couple of weeks ago. I think now a month and a half ago. Kudos to Fred for all of his hard work on that. We appreciate the comments and the feedback. It helps us grow. Know that is the first phase of a long project to continually improve access to resources across the state of New York for you. That's not a sort of done once and then never going to touch it again. We built that so that we continually work to improve and add more resources there. I'm very excited that in the fall we're going to have a DNA seminar with Blaine Bettinger and Angie Bush are going to join us for a 2-day seminar in New York. We haven't really talked about it a lot, and seats are already filling up. So if you want to come to that, make sure that you get your reservations in sooner rather than later.
And the member discount on that expires June 30th. So the price goes up for members as of July 1st. So if you're interested, now's the time to sign up.
Absolutely. I better get my registration.
Mine's in. I signed up for a consultation.
Oh yeah, that's the other really neat thing about it is that Angie and Blaine have both agreed to do some smaller consultations one-on-one with you. If you attend a seminar for an extra cost, you can sit down and actually get advice on your specific inquiry.
Yeah.
And Sue, I know you have a bunch of other things going on, so I will.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have that going on. This fall, we are also doing, earlier in October, this is October 7th, this is Saturday, we're doing a joint program with the Western New York Genealogical Society, and we have a day of programming, including Josh is one of the speakers, Jane Wilcox is one of the speakers, Blaine Bettinger, and a couple of local speakers. So that should be a fabulous, one-day action-packed event. There will be exhibits or tables from local societies as well, so you can learn about some of the local societies in Buffalo. And our partners out in Western New York have lined up some terrific tours and lock-ins and things like that for the Friday before and the Sunday after. All of those you can find on the event section of our website. You can see a full listing of everything that's going on as you scroll down the events website. So that's what's coming soon.
Yep.
We're working on a lot of plans for 2018 as well. So we'll let you know soon.
Yeah. We're also in the beginning of the planning phase for 2019.
Yes.
Which is our 150th birthday, and so we're going to have all sorts of things related. Yep. So there's a lot. Stay tuned. There's a lot.
Yep.
A lot happening.
And we will be bringing back a version of New York City Research in 2018, slightly differently formatted than this year's trip was, which was very successful. So.
Great, yeah, thanks, very exciting stuff. And so back to our questions here. Our next one comes from Ruth, and she says, I want to write a family history. So what advice do you have for that? And then, specifically, when do you reach that point where you can and should start writing? Because it seems never ending, as we all know.
Yep.
Do you want to start with that one? Or you want me to?
I have definite opinions on this, but I'll let you start.
I will say personally, I have struggled with this all along, but I did learn a long time ago to just start. As you're researching, just writing a little bit. And this springtime, we did have a 2-day writing workshop with Dr. Tom Jones, and that was one of the points he made, was every time you're researching, write a few sentences. No matter what you're doing, start here, keep going. You can always go back and edit later, so it doesn't need to be a full article to begin with. It can start with just your research notes. So a few sentences at a time.
Yeah, I would echo that. I made the mistake of sort of not writing when I first researched, and now I have piles and piles of paper and things that I want to write. And so Sue's laughing because we get into the same situation.
Yeah.
But the truth is that you should start writing as soon as you want to in this process, and really the sooner the better, because we know there's always going to be something more to find. But the time at sort of the end to write, how you reach that point where, okay, now I'm done with my research, I'll start writing, you might never be done. So writing should be a continual process.
And it doesn't have to be polished as an article for publication. You know, it can be, you know, what would your family want to know? It's helpful to have some of your own research notes, maybe in a different format, but it's okay to put things in brackets that you will delete later. You know, I need to go find this original record, I only found the index. You can put that in brackets, and then when you go find the original, you can take that out.
Yeah, and I would also, you know, add that sometimes writing, I consider writing to be a part of the research process, because when I'm forced to write and I'm forced to actually think about something and analyze it, I see things that don't fit or that do fit together. It's not until you actually have to write that out that you start to see the patterns, or rather, you know, if you don't have enough information, you see that as well.
And Josh, that reminds me of one of the things you mentioned quite some time ago about going back and organizing your research. You've done that before, right?
Yep. I've broken from research and organized.
And you found some new things.
I did, because, you know, we have answers. We have answers to a lot of our genealogical questions probably already in the papers that we have. We just sometimes we move ahead in research without analyzing what we have.
Right.
So I think that might be a webinar topic, actually.
That could very well be. Or you've learned more about a topic and go back and look at it with fresh eyes.
Yes. I mean, you look at a person on a census or land record that you didn't realize was as important as they are, sort of 5 years down the road, and you now know how they played with the family.
Right.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
So our next question here is about our own record sets. So what record sets are currently being digitized by the NYGMB? You want to start off with the list?
It's a big
question.
Lots?
Yes, lots. One of the really important collections that there are pieces of it around, including pieces of it in our e-library, is a religious record set that tends to go by the title Vosburgh. Royden Vosburgh was the archivist for the New York GMB, and Fred did a really nice blog post about that last September.
Yeah, it's on our blog. Yeah, a little bit down.
About the Vosburgh collection. There is a research aid in our knowledge base about the Vosburgh collection. So I would highly recommend people go and look at the knowledge base and look for that research aid. So part of it is digitized in the e-library, but not all of it. So we are in the process of processing the images that are now digitized so we can upload all the rest of those parishes to the e-library. So that religious records are hugely important in New York, just like land. So that is one of the major collections. We also have some other religious records and a couple of family name indexes that have some very interesting people in them.
Yeah. I mean, we're focused very much when we're looking at records digitized on religious records at this point. You know, we know that they're an important on a record substitute, and not just records for sort of just the New York City area or even the immediate metro region. I mean, Vosburgh contains records from all over the state, and collections that we're working on also. We're working to expand that to include other areas in the state of New York.
Yep.
So that's a piece.
Yes, one piece. More later.
Yeah, thanks. So next question comes from Phyllis, and she says she recalls hearing somewhere that the New York State County Red Books are now online, and if they are, how can they be accessed? And then maybe for those of us who don't know, what are the Red Books and how can they be valued?
This is a great genealogy question, because everybody says the Red Book, the Green Book, the Blue Book. So the Red Books.
Fred asked me something about Red Books. This is a Red Book. Do you want to explain what they are, Josh?
So these are surveys that were done by the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. And so they include information about, we can see that close, but they include information about specific record types and record sets in counties across the state of New York.
Right. And a number of them, I did check, and we have 29 WPA volumes that are digitized in our e-library in the digital books section. So this one in particular is one of the Red Books that is digitized and in the e-library. So.
And these are great for finding sources that aren't yet online, that might not be online, which I'm not sure even exist in sort of the Red Book series. So it's a phenomenal resource.
Yeah, and you did mention WPA, that's the Works Progress Administration, also known as, later called the Works Progress Administration during the Great Depression. So historical record survey from the 1940s, 30s. So if a record set existed at that point in time and was documented, you know at least it was around then and where it was at that point in time.
Yeah.
So.
Any tips on, say, if you do find out where a record was or a record set was in 1940, is it likely that it's in the same place, or how difficult?
I think a lot of that would depend on where it was at that point in time. If it was held at a county level, for instance, in theory, the county would still want to hold it. They could have transferred it to a historical society or a records management center and things like that. And while the quote unquote big book, the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer was being written, a lot of those record sets were identified, and the descriptions in the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer tell you where those may be now.
Okay, so. Great. Okay, so our next question comes from Florence, and she says that her grandmother changed her name completely somewhere around the turn of the century, probably around 1900. And so her question, I'm summarizing a little here, when someone does change their name, do they have to go to a court to do it? Would there be records that you could indicate, did others just change their name without any official process? Or, so what do we do with those people who seem to just all of a sudden their name is something else?
Well, I think part of it is, if it changed completely, there were times where people needed to go to court to do that. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the laws were on what years you would have had to do that. But many times people used middle names or a christening name or whatnot. So what they used in a census or something could be just by what they were known as, their nickname.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, we always would hope that there'd be some legal document, but that just isn't the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes people will pick a portion of the name and use that. And so I wish I could identify for Florence an exact record set to look at, but it's very possible that it wasn't a legal name change at all.
Yeah. And if you can get to a time period, it might be worth going and looking at what court records would have been available. Most likely a county court, Supreme Court in the county in New York would be a good place to look for that. But just as a reminder to people, census records up until 1940, it was not necessarily indicated, it wasn't indicated who the informant was. Mm-hmm. So it could have been a neighbor who answered, for instance, a census enumerator's questions. So, if you know me as Sue, that's fine, but maybe my given name is actually Susanna or Sarah or something. And so that it wouldn't match.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, great, thanks. So this next question comes from Anne, and it's a little long, so I'll summarize. But basically, she's looking for someone who was born in what is recorded as Washington, New York, in 1791. And as we know, there are many places named Washington. So as a general question, what do we do with those places? Is there anything else to look for that might give us clues as to which place would be the correct one, that has multiple names?
I mean, a couple of things I can think of. First, you'd want to look at the record set that sort of says Washington on it. You want to look at other places that are referenced there to see if they're referencing towns or counties, because that might give you an initial clue whether you're talking about a town or a county. So does this record keeper consistently only list a county or consistently list a town? It really is a case of comparing families as they relate to both areas, because there's a lot of Washingtons in 17,
yes. And not just New York.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, because in New York, the jurisdictions, yes, you have counties, yes, you have towns, you do have villages that were incorporated, but then you have many, many place names and hamlets that could also hold that name. And looking at the families, as you said, of the same names and the family groups that could have been there. But you may have to look at multiple places. You may have to look at the county, the town, the village, and they could be completely different parts of the state.
Yeah, I mean, you want to look at what Washington was established in 1791, right? How likely is it the family came from there? And that's where actually the research guide and gazetteer can be helpful, because each of the county guides have lists of different towns and other areas for the counties, and alternate names and things that can be helpful.
Great, thanks. So we did also, and now I'm sort of combining many questions, but we received many questions about immigration, and most of them were the sort of traditional brick walls. Can't find the immigration records, or can't confidently identify them. So what do you have any very general tips for those of us trying to find the immigration records, or the birthplace of our immigrant ancestors?
I will actually I know I didn't mention this when we talked about new things that are coming up. We're in the sort of ending stages of producing our new publication, which is a guide to immigration into New York and New York City, which will answer some of those questions. But as a briefer answer to those questions, I mean, I would say sort of to start off, it can be very difficult to find sort of that definitive immigration record. Sometimes you have to work and narrow down the process step by step. The one thing that I have learned, the more work in immigration records that I've done, is you have to look at the overall story of when someone is arriving and what records are behind outside of that one passenger list, because it might not be, the passenger list is sort of our goal, but that isn't always the one record that exists.
And there were so many people who came into New York City, if they lived here for even just a year or two, it's possible that they got in a city directory. And that could fill some time between, the next census on a state census on a 5 or a federal census on a 0. And we don't always have those state censuses for New York. There was a fire that burned the state copies up through 1911. But some county censuses do survive. So looking at other record sets to help you define. But it is difficult, and when people have changed their name to Americanized their name, for instance, it can be difficult, because you may have to go back and try and figure out what their original name was.
And the other thing, remember the chain migration series. Remember the fact that you're not always going to find a complete family unit that arrives together. You might find a part of the family that comes first, and we say it a lot, but it's very true when you start looking through the records. And so don't assume that that they're going to come through all together and everything's going to be perfect in that record.
And they could have come from a port that you wouldn't have thought of too.
Yes. So, because the cost to immigrate, if you consider everything that you have to pay for and different fees that you have to pay. I was just in Ontario, Canada this past weekend, and we talked a lot about the Canadian border and people that would come to Canada because it was less expensive and then cross the border into New York. So,
and I have one line that did that, and I researched for years for their immigration, not going to find it.
Okay, great, thanks. So we are running short on time here. Probably only have time for one more question. What would you say is maybe the most common question that you receive, at conferences or related to New York State research that you think those watching would really benefit from hearing the answer to? Could be anything really.
Well, I would say one of the most common questions we get is from people, often from the Midwest, living out in Michigan or Ohio or places like that, and they've seen on the 1850 census that the family was from New York. Those are difficult ones if you don't have any other clues to location. So if you definitely would need to work your full, thorough research in the location they lived at the time. Maybe they still held land. Maybe there's something in a deed or in probate or anything else that would indicate where in New York. Hopefully narrowing down to a county at least. That's when we hear a lot.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I get that question a lot, and I think the biggest thing for me, having grown up in the Midwest and then come back to New York after my family left, is I never realized that my family lived in multiple places in New York before they left and went to the Midwest. It wasn't just about finding that one New York county, and so this is where a timeline becomes very, very helpful in understanding that my family came from New England to Washington County, New York, and then they came to Tompkins County, New York, and then they went to Allegheny County, New York, and then they went to Michigan, and then they went to Wisconsin, and they went to Idaho. And in Idaho they simply said born in New York. and you know, and they miss sort of all of the migration in between.
Right, right. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. We are just about finished here. So thanks, Josh and Sue, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching live. We will definitely be posting a blog roundup of these answers, you know, as well as some video clips, you know, from the live broadcast. So we'll be doing one of these again very soon. So keep an eye out for our email newsletter. Check our website for all up-to-date news and information on what's going on with the New York GMB. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Frederick.
Sure.